and I'm crying and he's crying. And I'm just saying, God, I don't know what I've brought into my house. I don't know what kind of baggage I had not equipped to help this little boy.
It's not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who was actually in the arena, whose face is marked by dust and sweat and blood.
From Men in the Arena, it's Equipping Men in 10. Our conviction is to call you into the arena of manhood, call you out of the faceless, nameless bleachers, and call you up to be the best version of you, because when a man gets it, everyone wins. Enjoy today's episode.
Men in the Arena Army, we salute you. Hey guys, thanks for listening to this episode of the Men in the Arena podcast. I'm Jim Ramos, your host for today's show. Today is not an interview episode. It's not an Equipping in 10. It's a hybrid type of interview that we've been doing through the summer with our guest blog writers, and I'm really excited about today. This guy was not only one of the greatest students to ever come through my youth ministry, but he's also the youngest national team captain on our team. You're going to love what he has to say, and he's wise beyond his years. You're going to really, really enjoy our podcast interview about fathering the fatherless. 4 reasons changing others changes you. Guys, hey, before we get into our interview with Sam, thanks for making the Men in the Arena podcast Spotify's #1 podcast for Christian men. So Sam Roberts is a diesel mechanic, worship leader, and outdoorsman. He loves to serve in his church. He loves camping, fishing, hunting. His unwavering faith journey started as a young child, has been guided by many great men whom he's thankful for. His single sentence testimony is, quote, "God is always faithful," end of quote. Sam, as I shared, is the youngest Men in the Arena national team captain at 29 years old. He lives in Baker City, Oregon, with his beautiful wife of 9 years, Bethany, 5-year-old daughter, Avery, 2-year-old son, Levi. Sam, it's great to have you on the show, man. How you doing?
Good.
Feel like I see you here and again on different Zoom calls, and you were at our banquet this year, so got to speak briefly to you. So hopefully we can get out to Baker City one of these days and hang out.
Yeah.
So, hey, buddy, tell these guys a little bit more about you, what makes you tick, a little bit more about your journey, just so they can have a better context about who you are.
Yeah. So I guess I'm kind of the typical guy who was raised in church. I grew up, both parents, a sister, and I grew up spending more nights at church, doing things at church than anything else. Mm-hmm. So that was, churchmanship was kind of something that was grown into me. I mean, Sunday mornings, emptying trash, locking up the building with my dad, who did janitorial there. My mom worked at the church. She's a pastor now. So with that, I was really grown up in the church. And I was introduced to a lot of people who helped guide and mentor me in that. And so my testimony in a way is boring because I didn't have any of these crap the bed moments, but it's also a testimony of how faithful God is when we're faithful to him. Mm-hmm. And I've just seen that time and again in my life. So I'm grateful that I was raised that way. I was definitely fortunate to have godly parents guiding me and people around me. Met my wife while serving at church at summer camp, and she had a bunch of kids at camp, and I did too, and we hit it off from there. That's why I tell guys it's always good, if you're a young guy and you're wanting to serve the church, serve at summer camp. It's not just for teens.
That's where all the cute girls are.
You'll meet some godly women.
That is it. Well, it's funny, I got to tell you, because thinking of your testimony, Sam, because I remember in high school you wrestled with that a little bit, and I remember my son Colton shared his testimony. He's a young life leader as well as you are. He's a wildlife leader. And he shared his testimony. He goes, "I just didn't have much to say, Dad." And I said, "You know what? I thought of you, Sam." And I told him, I said, "You know what? That's the greatest testimony you can ever have. You're 24 years old. You're a college football athlete who had more consecutive starts than anybody in the school history. You're a virgin." I go, "Dude, that's the greatest testimony you could ever offer. So don't shrink back from that. Be proud of that." And so, I say, well done, Sam. I remember pulling up to Dayton High School, and you were in high school, and you were waiting for me at the front of the school. I always thought that you were the only guy that ever did that. So I thought, this guy, I knew that you're a special guy, and it's been fun to watch your journey. When do you turn 30?
November 30th. So
Okay, I knew
6
you're
months.
still, because you're a year behind my oldest son. November 30th. You are the oldest 29-year-old I think I've ever met. And I mean that as a compliment, because you just have always done it right. You've been in ministry since you were in middle school. I mean, you've just always done it right. And so I want to go back 10 years. So Men in the Arena had just launched under the name The Great Hunt for God.
Yep.
You were 19 years old. You got involved with Dale Culver and Dale's group. And actually, you and Dale are actually co-captains of a real strong and powerful national team now. So you and Dale are very, very close. And you had an interesting moment at 19. I know the study was Job 29, the 9 traits of manhood from that chapter. And one of those is father to the fatherless. Will you tell us about that moment?
Yeah. So I was 19. I think I was engaged. It might have been right before I was engaged, when I started this Men in the Arena group with Dale.
Okay.
So it was a bunch of guys meeting down in Chemeketa. And I mean, I was youngest by far, so I had very little to say. But I knew, I'm like, hey, there's a lot of guys in here. I can pick some stuff up. I've always been of the mindset, like, don't make your own mistakes, learn from other people's mistakes, and don't do that crap.
Absolutely.
So, like why suffer? So I'm just listening, mostly. I mean, spoke very little. And yeah, this chapter came up. And for some reason, I mean, I couldn't even remember the chapter about it until you say that, what it was. Just this father, the fatherless, that we're called to do this. And that just stuck with me. Obviously, I don't have kids. I'm not even married at this point. Very involved in middle school ministry. But it just stuck with me, this notion of fathering the fatherless. And at 19, you can't really put context to that. But for some reason, that really did stick with me. And I continued volunteering and leading various middle school ministries. When we moved out to Baker, I became the wildlife director. Volunteer position, not as glamorous as it sounds. Every title sounds great. But what we had an amazing ministry to these kids who don't go to church, that we're really shooting for kids who don't go to church. And it was run by all these volunteers. And we had an amazing ministry reaching these kids. And I think through that time, we've been in Baker City, coming up on 9 years now, 8 years. And that's always come with me. And it was kind of one night at camp where it finally kind of clicked, because I had a cabin of 10 boys. And I'd seen patterns when you live with middle school boys, but this year was really profound because things started clicking with me. And I realized 8 out of 10 of them didn't have a solid relationship with their dad. And these weren't fringe kids. These weren't at-risk teens. They didn't grow up in poverty. These were average middle class, upper middle class kids. But yeah, so I started seeing things in the pool, like these kids who didn't have dads. They didn't know how to fight fair. They're the ones who would come up and choke you. They're the ones who kick you in the crotch. And these things started adding up. And I'm realizing, man, these kids, they need a father. They don't have it. And that's where this fathering the fatherless really started to kind of like identify itself in my life. And I could start putting some context to it. And it really kind of kicked into gear once I had a kid.
You know, that's interesting, Sam, because I left youth ministry and started working with men. And one of the catalysts for that was realizing that the biggest problem in my youth ministry was dads that weren't engaged. And that was the impetus that led me to launching this ministry, because you're absolutely right. Yeah, you can be a Christian dad and totally disengage your kids. It's not good enough just to be physically present. There's so much more to it. And so talk about your experience. You had a later experience with an organization called Safe Families for Children. How did that organization change you? What happened?
So Beth and I, we'd been talking off and on for a while about, do we want to get involved with the foster system? And we wanted to help these kids. And we wanted to give them a safe home. We wanted to bring Jesus into their lives. But at the same time, I mean, we just weren't sure about foster and letting the state get into our home, because we're trying to protect our kids and stuff. And so we're praying about this, and this conversation keeps coming up. And then Safe Families, this ministry, kind of pops up on the radar at a church board meeting I was at. And it is basically the Christian model of hospitality, radical hospitality, where you're risking what you have to change the life of somebody else and bring them into your home and show Jesus. And the whole goal is to intervene in these families before the state has to get in. And that jumped at me. I'm like, man, if we can, because the church, the state, the programs that the state have are absolutely necessary, but man, it is no substitution for what the church should be doing. Children are not the government's responsibility. It's the Christian's responsibility. It's the church's responsibility. For sure. So this ministry that, hey, we're going to try to get these kids before they fall off this waterfall. We're going to jump in the river and start trying to throw kids back onto the bank, is the imagery they use. And we're like, that's for us. Let's do this. So we got involved. It's totally on our terms. And there's a whole team of support from churches. There's a team that gets involved with the parents or the guardians. There's a team that meets with the kids and provides them resources while they're living in our house. So we just get to surround these people with godly people, the whole family, the children and the parents and the grandparents, and just kind of show them what the love of Jesus is in a radical way.
That's so cool, man. Well, Dale, obviously, Dale has adopted a son. And then we had a 23-year-old guy live at our house for a year who his dad had gone to jail for basically raping him consistently over 10 years. But these things are so important. There's so many hurting children out there. And we really need to have guys who are willing to, what you said, showing hospitality. That word hospitality is the word philoxenia, and it means to love strangers. And so we think hospitality is inviting your buddies over after church. That has nothing to do with that. It's everything to do with loving strangers. So when you say that radical hospitality, that's absolutely right. So I want to go to something you wrote in your blog, Sam, and I thought it was really powerful. You said, quote, notice how James 1:27 sums up the entire function of religion into 3 actions. Religion, and you quote James 1:27, religion that is pure and undefiled before God the Father is this: to visit orphans and widows in their affliction and to keep oneself unstained from the world. So let's do this, Sam. Let's unpack. You've learned 4 things through this fostering children that it has impacted you deeply. Let's talk about those things. The first lesson, you said fathering the fatherless is a mandate. Now, I mean, I think that some guys listen might go, whoa, 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 put the skids on, brakes. So unpack that for us.
Yeah, I mean, so James, he sums it up there, and I've never heard a sermon preached on this because it would really threaten the church model. And I don't want people to hear me wrong and say organized religion, we don't need it. That's not what I'm saying. But what James is saying is the scope of religion is very small. So it doesn't matter if you serve the church. It doesn't like you should be serving the church. But if all you do is pass the offering plate and you're an usher, if all you do is your security at your church, if all you do is run the coffee shop at your church and those kind of things, you're not meeting what James sees as pure, undefiled religion. Serving the church is not good enough for a Christian man. You have to, our mission, that doesn't fulfill the Great Commission, does it?
No.
Like the Great Commission is not collect offering at church and sit there nicely and dressed well. It is visit the orphans and widows in their affliction. You're going to them in their bad moments, in their affliction. So that kind of spurred me on. I'm like, well, shoot, that really simplifies things. Like,
yeah, it does.
I mean, forget all the trappings and all the fancy things we get hung up on, the worship, the good sermons, should we do service at this time, that time, all the things. It's like, let's keep it simple, guys. Visit people in their affliction and keep oneself unstained from the world. So that's a call to holiness and a call to outreach to the lost, to the less fortunate. It's 2 things to do. it just simplifies it, right?
Well, and that's the funny part, Sam. I just learned this about a year ago. The church exploded around the Mediterranean because of the gift of not the gift, it's not a gift, but because of biblical hospitality, because people were willing to take in strangers, strange evangelists, pastors, teachers, because they didn't have a Motel 6 on every corner, didn't have a church on every corner. The church was being developed and formed. And I think this hospitality is a massive, that's what James is talking about right here. Right. And, sidebar, Martin Luther hated the book of James. When Martin Luther had his own Bible translation, and he had James as the last book of the Bible. He hated the book of James because he believed in solo fide, faith alone. But faith is, we're saved by faith alone, but our faith doesn't stand alone. And this is the problem, right?
Like, we have too many good Christian men who are worthless to the kingdom of God.
They're in the bleachers.
They're sitting in the
Sam
church
Roberts
pews.
calling it as it is.
They're sitting in the church pews, not in people's affliction. And so when you put that with Matthew 18:5, whoever receives one such child in my name receives me. So we have two simple mandates, and we have Jesus saying, you want to receive me, receive a child.
Well, what's interesting, Sam, is in Matthew 25, Jesus talks about, get away from me, I never knew you. And they said, whoa, we went to church, we did all these cool things. And he said, but hold on a second. I was in prison, you didn't visit me. I was naked, you didn't clothe me. I was a stranger, you did not welcome me in. And I looked at that verse and I realized, oh my, everything here is about hospitality. It's loving strangers. It's picking up the hitchhiker. It's, buying a Big Mac for the guy holding the cardboard sign, whatever it may be. And we often think, well, I'm not going to help that person. Well, have you ever thought that maybe it's not about that person?
Yeah.
Maybe it's about you.
If you're in this moment of your life, and I hear people say this all the time, man, I just need more Jesus in my life right now. I'm in a dry spell, or I'm feeling spiritually empty or weak.
Yeah.
It's like, well, okay, so what you're saying is you want more Jesus. Matthew 18:5, receive one such child in my name and you will receive me. So that right there impacted me when we had our first, I know that's true. I know that verse is true.
Yes.
You receive a child, you will receive Jesus in your life. He will make himself present. Because our first time we had kids, I should tell people, I am so unqualified to do this. I turn wrenches. I'm a diesel mechanic. I'm a farmer, a blueberry farmer. I mean, my wife is the educated one. I have zero college education. I have nothing in child development or social studies or anything. But if you're willing, God equips you. And I know Matthew 18:5 is true, because when we had our first set of kids come in, we got told, hey, there's this mom, single mom. This is December, January, when we get these kids. She's been living in a van all winter with twins and a 6-year-old. And this is the Eastern Oregon winters. I mean, it is cold, highs of 20. And this gal has been living in her van with 3 children. So I like my little kids. I'm not a huge fan of little kids, but I'm like, okay, this is what we signed up for.
Yeah, totally.
Let's rock and roll. And we meet this family at 9:30 at night in the McDonald's parking lot. And I was scared, because I'm seeing these kids' faces and they're just glazed over. They're not looking at you. We started talking with one of the ministry leads, and we're like, there might be some mental issues here with these kids. I mean, they've lived in a van. They have no medical history, really, extreme generational poverty. So they're like, keep an eye on this. Let us know if you need help. And we're like, okay. So we load them all into our van and we go home. And growing up in the church, I hadn't had that moment before in my life where I needed to cry out to God for help, because I was in that moment where I knew I am hosed, that I am inequipped. I am not the man for this. Until when I was holding this little boy, he's 2 years old and he's crying for his dad, and it broke my heart there. And I was on my knees crying, because this kid was crying for his dad, but his dad was a pedophile. So this kid is crying for one of the worst people who could be around him right now, because that's all he knew. And in that moment where I found myself, I'm holding this kid at midnight. And I'm crying and he's crying. And I'm just saying, God, I don't know what I've brought into my house. I don't know what kind of baggage. I am not equipped to help this little boy, but you are. So you make this happen, and give me the strength to make the right decisions, and to be what this little boy and this little girl needs. And he did. Like, I found there was moments I wanted to pull my hair out, but I found patience, and we found such satisfaction seeing these kids grow from being malnourished, barely able to walk across the living room, to peeling out in our backyard, kicking balls. I mean, we saw coordination, we saw motor skills, we saw health. They started growing. It was amazing. And that's when, man, I received these children. Jesus showed up in our house in unimaginable ways. Our daughter embraced these kids, and she was excited when they went back home to mom. She got the idea of what we were doing, my 4-year-old. And man, that brought my wife and I together, because we're up at night at our wits' end praying with each other like we hadn't done before. Man, you take a child in, Jesus shows up in your life.
Well, that's lesson 2 for you, right? And I resonate with lesson 2, because one of my life mottos is, you don't have to be the best. You just have to outlast the rest. And your life lesson here is, you don't have to be the best, just willing. I want to read
do something.
I want to read a quote out of your blog, because I thought it was powerful. You already shared it, but I want to read it. You said, I was the first safe man to hold him, and it wrecked me. That was the first time in my life I cried out to God for help, and I learned what it means to find refuge in him. And by God's strength only, my pregnant wife and I took care of those 3 kids and our own daughter for 8 weeks, while both working full-time jobs. It was the largest faith growing time in my life. And I would probably say for your 4-year-old as well, to watch this whole thing unfold, that was a massive thing for her. And so that's just awesome, man. That's just to realize you're the first safe person to ever hold a human, and it's not even your human. So that's powerful.
Yeah.
Man. So let's talk about lesson number 3. You talked, and this kind of goes with lesson 2, but I want you to unpack it for us. Lesson 3 that you learned was the Lord's refuge is powerful. Explain that.
So with these kids coming in, there's obvious risk. Like, I'm trying to raise my daughter this one way, and there's risk of what's she going to learn? What's the baggage coming in? There's risk of, like, I don't know how to handle a physically abused 4-year-old. So I had to take refuge in the Lord and rely on the Lord's strength to get this done, because I'm not equipped. And me on my own, I'm not going to be able. I didn't put like the behavioral things. That's not in my blog, but it's definitely a concern of ours, because, man, what's my daughter going to learn from these strangers that we're bringing in? And that's part of that radical hospitality. You're risking something. So part of the risk is my kids.
Yeah, for sure.
And I have to trust God that, man, God is going to protect the safety of my child. God's going to protect the safety of my wife, and that God is going to give us the strength to do something we have never done before. Because in those moments, failure is an option.
Oh, totally.
I mean, this could go really bad. But you have to trust God. You have called me to this. You've mandated that I intervene as a Christian man, that I intervene in children's lives, and that I meet them in their garbage, in their worst moments. So if you're calling me to that, I have to trust that your refuge will keep me safe. If you don't trust that, it's not going to work out. If you try doing this on your strength, man, I cannot give these children what they need just because I'm Sam Roberts, because I've been to church, because I know some scripture that I can throw out real quick and look impressive.
Well, it's funny, Sam, you said earlier, you have nothing to offer. You have no education. And it's funny. I have never even thought of that with you, because you're You're wise beyond your years. God has given you a platform as a elder in your church and a worship leader in your church. In fact, we're going to post a video of you as worship leader. We're going to put it on the blog. Instead of me having the video, we're going to put you on there, because it's a powerful 8-minute video of you really confronting the men of your church in a ministry setting. It's really, really powerful. So, God equips those he calls. And so you may not have a college education, but honestly, all that means is you're in debt and you've been inundated with a critical race theory. So,
Well,
and
I only say that because I've encountered people at our church and our community when they ask us about safe families, they're like, oh man, I don't have any training and behavioral kids behavior. I don't even know how you say that training, but I'm like, dude, guys, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Take refuge in the Lord and he'll make it happen.
Well, one of my favorite verses in the Bible, maybe my favorite Psalm verse in the Psalms, is Psalm 61:2. Lead me to the rock that is higher than I. And that's what you're saying, right? You're saying, hey,
yeah.
I don't have what it takes, but God, in your supernatural ability, lead me to you as my refuge. I love another verse in 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 6. It says, cast all your cares upon him because he cares for you. And then verse 7 says, humble yourselves under the mighty hand of God, and he will lift you up in due time. And it's a picture of God cupping his children in his hands, covering and lifting. And so God, this is the hard part, Sam, is that we don't understand that until we're forced to.
Yeah. I mean, how can you understand what the refuge of the Lord is unless you put yourself in a position where you need it?
Well, and the funny part to me in this story is I'm thinking you're the refuge. I mean, I'm thinking you're the refuge. You're the one, you've got you and Bethany have these little children. You're the refuge. But even when and this is probably a cool teaching point, even when we decide to be the refuge, we need refuge more than ever.
Yeah.
So because
Absolutely.
we're often in over our heads, right? So there's a step of faith there. So that's really cool, man. And here's the other thing. How old were you at the time? This midnight deal with these 3 children? How old were you?
So Avery, 26, 27.
Oh yeah, you were old.
27.
You were an old guy. Yeah. So hey, I want to read one more quote from your blog that will go out, I think, in mid-July, and the lesson number 4. So the last thing I want to read is this. You said, quote, as a man, your influence is the most powerful weapon you have. Your influence in the life of a child or teen will set them on a course for victory or destruction. How will you use your influence? Are you ready to get out of the stands and change the lives around you? That is such a great quote. Lesson 4, it doesn't take much time. Talk to me.
So we had those 3 kids, the twins and their older sister. We had them for 8 weeks, maybe a bit more. Honestly, a blur. My wife was very pregnant, expecting her second child. We're working full time. Our church came around us and supported us for the daycare and stuff. So that's an extreme case, right? Of time. That needed a lot of time. Those kids needed a lot of time. But we've had other kids come through our home where it was just a weekend. And some people might be, holy crap, I got to live with a strange kid for a weekend. But it was a weekend. Grandma needed a break. And the kids we've done this, they've been great kids. They don't have it. Grandma is raising their kids because dad bailed, mom bailed, but let's focus on dad bailed. So grandma's now the parent and she needs a break. So we take these kids for a weekend. Grandma gets a break. They live with us. We take them to church. We should introduce them to people. They get involved in a youth group, and then we might not never see them again. But it's that quick. It's 24 hours. Sometimes it's taking kids fishing. I know over in McMinnville, see you later. How about you volunteer to take a kid fishing? Like, how many guys on this podcast like fishing and can teach a kid to fish for 3 hours? And in that moment, that kid is probably not going to have a dad.
Yeah.
Statistically speaking, he is not going to have a dad. And for 3 hours, you get to be a Christian man and teach him man things.
Absolutely.
If he's squirreling around and can't focus, you're like, hey, let's focus on fishing. We're fishing. Let's focus on things. You get to teach him a little bit of discipline for 3 hours, and that's all it takes. But in that time, you could be the first man who took the time to teach him something.
You might be the first man he ever meets.
Yeah.
I mean, think about that for a second. Well, so Sam, you are working with Dale Culver, and you guys are co-leaders on one of our national teams, and that team is coming to an end for the summer.
Yep.
Tell us about that team in the fall. Tell us what you're gonna be doing. Tell us when you guys meet.
So we meet Wednesdays at 6 a.m. Pacific. We got guys mostly from Washington or Oregon, a couple from Washington. One guy hopped in last week from New York. We got a great group of guys. Dale and I have done, this might be our fourth team. Not to say the other groups of guys weren't awesome, but this group, I'm going to brag a little bit. This is a special group. We've got some great guys who are honest, they're open, and there's a lot of wisdom that gets shared on this group every morning. For me, this group Wednesday mornings is a real shot in the arm that keeps me focused on the things of God, being a man in leadership, and gets me through the rest of the week. And right now we are in the summit. We stopped right in the middle of the summit. We'll pick it up there and keep going on with the rest of the books. So that's book 3. And there's plenty of room.
Yeah, you guys have plenty of room. Now, wow, New York, that's 3 a.m. for him.
Yeah, apparently. That's his problem, not
what
mine.
a stud. Well, yeah, you guys have a real strong group, and Dale's shaking his head. It's 3 a.m. If it's 6 a.m., if you have a
forward.
My bad. Dale, you're right, honey. What would you say to a guy who says, you know what, I don't want to get involved in a virtual team. I think face-to-face, eye-to-eye is better because, guys won't be authentic on a camera. We won't be as close to the guys, via video from New York to Oregon. What would you say to a guy that says that these virtual teams are less than?
Prove it. Like, what do you have going right now that's better?
Sam Roberts. I love it.
Men's ministry isn't happening in your church at this level.
Yeah.
So why dog on something you don't even have right now? Give it a shot. You can say, well, the virtual and the technology, you can bag on all that stuff. And for all the problems social media and virtual stuff brings, it doesn't bring it to this. What this brings is a bunch of guys who you will never meet otherwise. And so I think part of the reason these virtual teams bring value and they work so well is because with it brings a bit of detachment.
Mm-hmm.
Because you can share your dirt and you're not going to run into that person at the grocery store and go, oh, they know what I said.
Yeah.
But you're going to see them every week and they're going to hold you accountable. So if you're worried about that like, oh, what if I have to see this person? Well, you're not. But it's still a good place to meet great men who struggle like you do. And for some reason, they do work better, believe it or not.
I'm hearing over and over again that guys are more open and vulnerable in the virtual teams than face-to-face because of what you just said, that guys are sharing stuff they've never seen shared in local face-to-face teams.
Yeah, and I think part of it is it's the same reason why everybody's a keyboard warrior. It's easy to argue and be mean when you can't see somebody. That's not what happens, but there's a level of detachment that brings security in that.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think that's why it works. And I have to agree, this group's been awesome. I'm enjoying the virtual things. I lead a in-person group Sunday mornings at my church also, and that one's great. It's much smaller though than our virtual team. It's about 5 or 6 guys on average. And I think in that small of a group, we all know each other well. That works too. But it's just not happening. I mean, I'm going to bet your church, if you're not in a men's ministry right now, if you go to your pastor and say, hey, what do we have for men's groups? It's going to be a 0.
Crickets. Yeah. So Sam, one of the things that guys also don't realize that we bring Telegram to the table. Can you talk to us about Telegram?
So I was a little annoyed that I had to download another app at first because I don't like apps and all now I got to set notifications and stuff. I'm like, why can't we just use text messages? So I was a skeptic. It works really well because there's no like goofy formatting. There's no delays. There's no lag. You don't get 3 of them duplicates. It works super smooth. And what it does, for some reason, again, I don't know why it works. We've tried this with text messages. It doesn't happen. With Telegram, it does. We are connected all week.
Yeah.
When a guy is struggling with something, he throws it on our thread and we're praying for him. We know where he's at. We're checking in with guys throughout the week, sharing successes, sharing our victories, sharing our struggles throughout the week. So we meet Wednesdays, and that's when we see each other and we talk in person, per se. But that through that Telegram app, it just works across your iOS, your Android, whatever phone you have. It works flawlessly, and you stay connected all week.
Yeah, it's kind of like, for those you don't know, it's like Facebook Messenger, but a lot of our guys don't use Facebook. And so it's a way to have a real quality app and a great way to communicate throughout the week without
it works really
being
well
on, let's say, social media. So guys, you can sign up by just going to our homepage of our website, menarena.org. Click the join our program button, and you can search for the team you want to be on. If you want to be on Dale and Sam's team, and if you want to be, they're the only morning team. You can click on that and get involved there, and you will have a great time, and you will thank us for it. And so, Sam, thanks so much for coming on the call today, man. I mean, I've told you this before, but I'm proud of you and the man you become, and the testimony that you bear witness of. It's inspiring. So thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
Hey guys, let's get our boots on the ground. Go click that button, join the program. It's going to cost you $15 a book. Wah, wah, wah. Go do it. I know guys that are charging $100 a month to sit at their feet in their Zoom groups, and we're saying $15 a book for a life change. Because guys, listen, it's not about us. It's about you being the hero in God's story. When a man gets it, everyone wins. When you guys go to our website, make sure you get my free download of the book. Tell them what great fathers tell their sons and daughters. Until next time, feel the wet sand on the arena floor. Hear the deafening roar of the crowd. Taste the sweetness of victory. Smell the stench of battle. Get in the game. Get dirty. Grind it out. Hold a child and be a man.
You've been listening to the Men in the Arena podcast. If you hunger to be your best version, then join thousands of men from around the world in our Men in the Arena forum on Facebook. This is the best place to have open discussions around the topic of biblical manhood. Make sure to explore our website at meninthearena.org, sign up for the weekly equipping blast, and take advantage of our many free resources designed to help you become your best version of a man. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Men in the Arena podcast. Remember, when a man gets it, everyone wins.